Don't you think men really like intelligence more when it comes right down to it?
Please. Are we going to go back to that? Are you kidding?
Sure. I mean, a brain, a caring...
It's a regular Tuesday night in 1986, and millions of Americans are settling in to watch their favorite late-night
What the hell's the matter with you? You're on 26 years. You're
They're
starting to be like
expecting
Reagan.
laughs, celebrity interviews, and that familiar warm smile. But what they don't know is that behind the scenes, one of the biggest betrayals in television history is about to unfold. A betrayal so shocking that it would end a friendship forever and change late-night TV as we knew it. For 30 years, Johnny Carson was the king of late-night television. Every night, he walked out to that familiar theme song, told his jokes, and made America laugh before they went to bed. He seemed like the nicest guy in the world, always smiling, always charming. But here's what most people didn't know. Johnny Carson had a dark side. When he got angry, really angry, it was explosive. And when he held a grudge, he held it forever. Today, we're going to dive deep into the most intense, shocking, and sometimes heartbreaking arguments that Johnny Carson ever had. These aren't just little disagreements or playful back-and-forth moments. These are full-blown feuds that destroyed friendships, ended careers, and revealed the real Johnny Carson behind all. That charm. Some of these stories will shock you, some will break your heart, and all of them will show you that even America's most beloved host was human after all. Let's start with the biggest betrayal of them all, the one that rocked the entire entertainment world. Joan Rivers was more than just a comedian to Johnny Carson. She was like family. For over 20 years, Johnny had been her mentor, her father figure, and the person who gave her the biggest break of her career. When nobody else in Hollywood would take a chance on a female comedian, Johnny did. He put her on The Tonight Show again and again, and eventually, she became his guest host whenever he took a vacation. Joan loved Johnny like a father, and everyone thought she would be the one to take over The Tonight Show when Johnny finally retired. She was funny, she was quick, and the audience loved her. Everything seemed perfect. But then, in 1986, everything fell apart in the most brutal way possible. Fox Television came to Joan with an offer she couldn't refuse. They wanted to give her own late-night talk show, making her the first woman ever to host a late-night show on a major network. It was a dream come true, but there was one huge problem. The network told Joan that if she wanted the job, she had to keep it completely secret until they announced it. They warned her that if the news leaked early, the whole deal could fall through. Joan found herself in an impossible situation. She knew she should call Johnny first and tell him about the offer, but she was terrified that if she did, word would get out and she'd lose the opportunity of a lifetime. So she made the hardest decision of her career. She decided to take the job without telling Johnny first. When the news broke, Johnny felt like someone had stabbed him in the back. This wasn't just about business to him. This was personal. Joan was like a daughter to him, and daughters don't keep secrets like this from their fathers. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. Joan knew she had to fix things, so she tried calling Johnny to explain. She wanted to tell him how sorry she was and how difficult the decision had been. But when Johnny heard her voice on the phone, he didn't even let her speak. He just hung up. Click. That was it, but Johnny wasn't done. He made sure that Joan would never, ever appear on The Tonight Show again. Not while he was the host, not after he retired, not ever. For the next 26 years, Joan Rivers was banned from The Tonight Show. Even after Johnny left and Jay Leno took over, the ban continued. It wasn't until Jimmy Fallon became the host in 2014 that Joan was finally allowed to return. Can you imagine? 26 years of silence because of one phone call that never happened. Joan later said that losing Johnny's friendship hurt her more than any bad review or career setback she ever faced. She had lost her mentor, her friend, and her father figure all at once, and there was nothing she could do to get him back. This wasn't just a professional disagreement. This was a heartbreak that lasted decades, and it showed the world that Johnny Carson could hold a grudge like nobody else. But not all of Johnny's confrontations were so serious. Sometimes they were absolutely hilarious, especially when they involved his good friend Don Rickles. Don Rickles was known as the king of insult comedy. He could make fun of anyone and everyone, and somehow people loved him for it. He and Johnny had been friends for years, and their relationship was built on playful teasing and good-natured insults. Don would come on The Tonight Show and roast Johnny, and Johnny would give it right back. It was all in good fun until one night when Don went too far. It was 1976, and Don was filming his TV show right next door to The Tonight Show at NBC Studios. One evening, Johnny was out of town, and Don was guest hosting The Tonight Show. During the show, Don picked up a small wooden cigarette box that always sat on Johnny's desk. It wasn't just any box, it was Johnny's favorite, a beautiful piece that he treasured. As Don was fooling around with it on camera, trying to get some laughs, he accidentally broke the lid. When Johnny came back the next day and saw his broken box, he was not happy. He asked the crew what happened, and when they told him it was Don Rickles, Johnny's eyes lit up with mischief. But this wasn't going to be good-natured mischief. Johnny was genuinely annoyed, and he was going to get his revenge in the most public way possible. The next night, while Don was filming his show in the studio next door, Johnny decided to pay him a visit. But this wasn't a friendly visit. Johnny walked out of his own studio, still in the middle of taping The Tonight Show, and marched straight into Don's set with cameras rolling and the broken box in his hand. The audience watching Don's show had no idea what was happening. They were watching a regular scene when suddenly Johnny Carson appeared out of nowhere, looking like an angry parent about to scold his child. "You broke my box, didn't you, Don?" Johnny said in that deadpan voice of his, holding up the damaged cigarette box for everyone to see. Don's face went white. He knew he was in trouble, and now it was happening in front of a live studio audience with cameras capturing every second. Don tried to make jokes and deflect, but Johnny wasn't having it. He stood there, half angry and half amused, making Don squirm like a kid who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. The whole thing was unscripted, unrehearsed, and absolutely brilliant television. Don Rickles, the man who could insult anyone without breaking a sweat, was reduced to a stuttering mess trying to apologize to Johnny Carson. It was role reversal at its finest. The confrontation became legendary, one of the greatest moments in Sakfinsekse Tonight Show history. It showed Johnny at his best, turning genuine irritation into comedy gold while still making his point crystal clear. Nobody, not even Don Rickles, was going to mess with Johnny's stuff and get away with it. While the Don Rickles incident was funny, Johnny's next major confrontation was anything but amusing. It involved a Vegas legend, serious threats, and the real possibility of violence. Wayne Newton was known as Mr. Las Vegas, a smooth performer, with a powerful voice who had built an empire in the desert. But Johnny Carson seemed to have it out for him, making jokes about Wayne's appearance, his mannerisms, and even his personal life night after night in his monologue. At first, Wayne tried to ignore it. He figured it was just Johnny being Johnny, making jokes about celebrities like he always did. But the jokes kept coming, and they were getting meaner. Johnny would make fun of Wayne's looks, suggest he was feminine, and even joke about his business dealings in Las Vegas. The final straw came when Johnny made a joke suggesting that Wayne had lost a big casino deal because of connections to organized crime. This wasn't just comedy anymore. This was serious stuff that could damage Wayne's reputation and career. Wayne had enough. Instead of complaining to the media or trying to fight back through his publicist, Wayne decided to handle this man to man. He drove straight to NBC Studios and demanded to see Johnny Carson face to face. What happened next was one of the most intense behind-the-scenes confrontations in Tonight Show history. Wayne, who was normally a gentle, soft-spoken man, was absolutely furious. He told Johnny in no uncertain terms that the jokes had to stop, and he wasn't asking nicely. According to people who were there, Wayne made it very clear that if Johnny continued making jokes about him, there would be serious consequences. This wasn't said with a smile or a laugh. Wayne was dead serious, and everyone in the room knew it. Johnny, who was used to being the one in control, was completely caught off guard. Nobody had ever confronted him like this before, especially not in his own building. Wayne didn't leave any room for misunderstanding. The message was simple: keep my name out of your mouth or else. The result was immediate and dramatic. Wayne. Newton's name completely disappeared from Johnny's monologue. The jokes stopped overnight, not gradually, but all at once. For a man who prided himself on his comedic freedom, Johnny's retreat was shocking. It showed that when someone stood up to him with real force, even the king of late night would back down. Wayne never talked about the confrontation publicly. He didn't try to get publicity out of it or make a big deal about it. He simply drew a line in the sand, and Johnny never crossed it again. While Wayne Newton's confrontation ended quickly, Johnny's next feud dragged on for years and was marked by something unusual for Carson: complete silence. Raymond Burr was a respected actor, best known for playing Perry Mason on television. He was a talented performer with a long, successful career, but he had one thing that made him a target for Johnny Carson. He was overweight. Night after night, Johnny would use Raymond Burr as the punchline for fat jokes. He'd make fun of his size, his eating habits, and his appearance. The audience would laugh, but Raymond wasn't laughing. He was hurt and embarrassed by the constant ridicule. Unlike other celebrities who fought back publicly or tried to laugh it off, Raymond handled the situation differently. He quietly asked people at The Tonight Show to talk to Johnny about easing up on the jokes. But the message never seemed to get through. Or maybe Johnny just didn't care. After Raymond's second appearance on The Tonight Show in 1976, he had made his decision. He would never come back. When the show's producers called to invite him back, he politely declined. When they called again, he declined again. He never made a big scene or complained to the media. He simply walked away. This quiet protest was more powerful than any angry confrontation could have been. Raymond Burr, a dignified man who had served his country in World War II and had a distinguished career, refused to be anyone's punchline anymore. Johnny never acknowledged Raymond's absence publicly, and Raymond never talked about Johnny in interviews. It was a Cold War fought in silence, but the message was clear. There's a difference between humor and humiliation, and Johnny had crossed that line. What made this feud so sad was how it revealed Johnny's blind spots. He seemed to think that if the audience laughed, then everything was okay. He didn't realize, or didn't care, that his jokes were genuinely hurting someone who had done nothing to deserve it. Raymond Burr's quiet dignity in the face of bullying remains one of the most powerful responses to Johnny Carson's sometimes cruel sense of humor. Johnny's conflicts weren't limited to celebrities and entertainers. Sometimes he went to war with institutions, and when the New York Times attacked his wallet, Johnny fired back with both barrels. In 1980, the New York Times published an article claiming that Johnny Carson was making $25 million a year, making him the highest paid person on television. While most stars might have just ignored the story or quietly corrected it, Johnny did what he did best. He went on the attack. The next night, millions of viewers tuned in expecting their usual dose of Johnny's humor. But instead, they got something they'd never seen before. Johnny Carson, visibly angry, standing behind his desk with a copy of the New York Times in his hand. Johnny called the article "damned unfair" and accused the newspaper of printing false information. He was genuinely upset, not just about the numbers, but about what he saw as an invasion of his privacy. His voice was sharp, his jokes were bitter, and his mood was darker than anyone had ever seen. The audience didn't know what to make of it. This wasn't the smooth, collected Johnny they knew and loved. This was a man who felt betrayed by a newspaper he had trusted and respected. Johnny felt that the article made him look greedy and out of touch, especially during a time when regular Americans were struggling with economic problems. He had spent decades building an image as a down-to-earth, regular guy from the Midwest, and now he felt that image was under attack. The confrontation with the New York Times showed a side of Johnny that few people had ever seen. He could dish it out with the best of them, but when he became the target, he didn't like it one bit. It was a rare moment when the man behind the desk dropped his mask and showed his vulnerability. The media picked up on Johnny's angry response, and it became a story in itself. Some people supported Johnny, saying he had a right to defend himself. Others thought he had overreacted to a fairly standard news story. Either way, it was clear that Johnny Carson did not like being on the receiving end of criticism. While Johnny's public battles were intense, his most painful confrontation happened in private, at what should have been one of the happiest moments of his career. In 1987, NBC threw a huge party to celebrate Johnny Carson's 25th anniversary as host of The Tonight Show. It was a glamorous event filled with celebrities, executives, and everyone who had been part of Johnny's incredible success. But what should have been a night of pure celebration turned into one of the most heartbreaking moments of Johnny's life. Johnny's relationship with his 3 sons had always been complicated. His dedication to The Tonight Show, his private nature, and his struggles with alcohol had created distance between him and his children. His middle son, Rick, had been trying for years to build a better relationship with his father, but it never seemed to work. When Rick showed up at the anniversary party, the tension was immediate. According to people who were there, what started as a quiet conversation between father and son quickly turned into something much worse. Details are hard to come by because Johnny was always very private about his personal life, but witnesses say that Rick confronted his father about putting his career ahead of his family. The conversation got heated, then it got loud, and then it became a full-blown argument right there in front of NBC executives and Hollywood stars. Some people said the fight nearly turned physical. Others said Johnny looked more hurt than angry. Whatever the exact details, it was clear that this wasn't just a disagreement. This was years of pain and resentment boiling over at the worst possible time. Johnny, who could handle hecklers, difficult guests, and media criticism, was reportedly shaken by the confrontation with his son. He left his own anniversary party early, and people noticed that he seemed withdrawn for the rest of the evening. Unlike his other feuds, this one had no punchline, no clever comeback, no way to turn it into entertainment. This was just a father and son who couldn't figure out how to love each other properly. The story gets even sadder. Rick Carson died in a car accident in 1991, just 4 years after the anniversary party confrontation. Johnny and his son never got the chance to make things right between them. This heartbreaking episode showed the real cost of Johnny's success. For all his charm on camera, he struggled with the most important relationships in his life. It was a reminder that even the most beloved entertainers are human beings with human problems. Not all of Johnny's confrontations ended in sadness. Sometimes they ended with a drink in the face. Jacqueline Susann was a best-selling author whose novel, Valley of the Dolls, had made her rich and famous. Her books were popular with readers, but critics often dismissed them as trashy or lowbrow. When she appeared on The Tonight Show, Johnny made it clear that he shared the critics' opinion. From the moment Jacqueline sat down, Johnny's attitude was condescending. He made jokes about her work being a guilty pleasure and suggested that her success was just based on sensationalism. The audience laughed, but Jacqueline could hear the disrespect in his voice. Then Johnny crossed a line. He made a comment about Jacqueline's appearance, suggesting that she looked more like a truck driver than a novelist. Whether he meant it as a joke or not, it was cruel and unnecessary. Jacqueline smiled and played along during the interview, but inside she was furious. She had worked hard for her success, and she didn't deserve to be humiliated on national television just because her books weren't considered serious literature. After the show ended, there was a party for the guests and staff. Jacqueline showed up with a drink in her hand and fire in her eyes. She walked straight up to Johnny Carson, looked him in the eye, and threw her Black Russian cocktail right in his face. The room went completely silent. Johnny stood there, dripping with vodka and coffee liqueur, too shocked to speak. Jacqueline didn't say a word. She just turned around and walked out like nothing had happened. Word of the incident spread through Hollywood like wildfire. Nobody could believe that someone had actually thrown a drink at Johnny Carson, the most powerful man in late-night television. It was bold, it was dramatic, and depending on your point of view, it was either completely justified or completely crazy. Johnny never talked about the incident publicly, but Jacqueline Susann never appeared on The Tonight Show again. She had made her point in the most memorable way possible, and while it probably cost her future appearances, she showed that she wasn't going to be anyone's punchline. The drink-throwing incident became legendary in Hollywood circles. It was proof that Johnny Carson's sharp tongue sometimes had real consequences, and that not everyone was willing to just sit there and take it. As Johnny's career continued, the world around him was changing, and sometimes his humor didn't change with it. This led to one of his most controversial moments, involving a young woman who was making history. In 1984, Vanessa Williams became the first African-American woman to be crowned Miss America. It was a groundbreaking moment that represented real progress in a pageant that had been criticized for its lack of diversity. When Vanessa appeared on The Tonight Show shortly after her victory, millions of people tuned in to see this historic figure. But Johnny's monologue that night included a joke that many people found deeply offensive. He made a comment about the pageant's changes, implying that Vanessa's victory was more about political correctness than her actual qualifications. The joke fell flat with many viewers and sparked immediate controversy. Vanessa Williams later said that Johnny's comment hurt her deeply. She had worked incredibly hard to win the crown, and she felt that his joke dismissed her achievement and reduced her historic victory to a publicity stunt. The backlash was swift and intense. Critics accused Johnny of being insensitive and out of touch. Civil rights groups condemned the joke, and even some of Johnny's longtime fans expressed disappointment. Johnny found himself in an uncomfortable position. He wasn't used to this kind of criticism, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. He offered a half-hearted apology, but mostly tried to wait for the controversy to blow over. The incident marked a turning point for Johnny, and for late-night television in general. It showed that jokes that might have been acceptable in the past were no longer okay in a changing world. It also revealed that even the most beloved entertainers weren't immune to criticism when they crossed certain lines. For Vanessa Williams, it was a painful but important lesson about the complexities of fame and the challenges of being a groundbreaker. For Johnny Carson, it was a reminder that his words carried real weight and could cause real harm. After years of feuds, arguments, and confrontations, one of Johnny's most shocking moments came when an old enemy finally returned to make peace. In 2014, more than 20 years after their bitter falling out, Joan Rivers finally returned to The Tonight Show. By then, Jimmy Fallon was the host, and Johnny Carson had been gone for decades. But the moment was still incredibly emotional. Joan was older now, her voice a little raspier, her hair a little grayer, but her spirit was still strong. As she sat in the guest chair, where she had sat so many times before, she talked about her relationship with Johnny and how much his rejection had hurt her. She spoke about the early days when Johnny had been like a father to her, giving her opportunities that nobody else would. She talked about the pain of losing that relationship and how it had affected her for decades. But she also talked about forgiveness. She said that despite everything that had happened, she still loved Johnny and still appreciated everything he had done for her career. She understood why he had been hurt, even if she couldn't change the decisions she had made. The interview was powerful and emotional, showing two legends of comedy trying to make sense of a relationship that had gone so wrong. Even though Johnny wasn't there to participate in the reconciliation, his presence hung over the entire conversation. Joan's return to The Tonight Show was more than just good television. It was a reminder that even the deepest wounds can eventually heal, and that forgiveness is possible even after decades of hurt and anger. When Johnny Carson finally decided to retire in 1992, he had been the king of late-night television for 30 years. His final show was supposed to be a celebration of his incredible career, but even then, Johnny couldn't resist one last argument. During his farewell episode, Johnny invited several comedians and former guests to help him say goodbye. The mood was nostalgic and warm, with everyone sharing fond memories and expressing their gratitude for Johnny's influence on their careers. But when one young comedian suggested that Johnny's style was outdated and that the new generation of hosts was bringing necessary changes to late-night television, Johnny's demeanor changed completely. The comment hit a nerve. Johnny had spent 3 decades perfecting his craft, and he wasn't about to let some upstart comedian dismiss his legacy. As old-fashioned, what followed was a sharp, pointed debate about the nature of comedy, the importance of professionalism, and the difference between innovation and gimmickry. Johnny defended his approach with passion and intelligence, arguing that good comedy was timeless, and that the fundamentals he had established would endure long after the latest trends had been forgotten. The argument wasn't ugly or personal, but it was intense and revealing. Even on his last night, Johnny Carson wasn't willing to back down from a challenge or let anyone diminish his achievements. In the end, the disagreement was resolved with handshakes and laughter, but it served as a perfect reminder of what had made Johnny Carson so special. He was proud, passionate, and completely committed to his vision of what late-night television should be. As Johnny signed off for the final time, he left behind a legacy that was more complex than most people realized. He was the master of late-night entertainment, a man who could make millions of people laugh every single night. But he was also human, with all the flaws and contradictions that come with being human. Johnny Carson's career was defined not just by his incredible success, but by the intense arguments and confrontations that revealed his true character. He was a man who demanded respect and loyalty, who held grudges and fought back when he felt wronged, and who wasn't afraid to show his emotions when it really mattered. These intense moments remind us that behind every great entertainer is a complex human being with real feelings, real relationships, and real conflicts. Johnny Carson wasn't just a television personality. He was a man who lived his life fully, with all the drama, pain, and passion that entails. From his devastating feud with Joan Rivers to his heartbreaking confrontation with his son, from his hilarious revenge on Don Rickles to his serious face-off with Wayne Newton, Johnny Carson's arguments were as memorable as his jokes. They showed us that even comedy's greatest king was human after all. If you enjoyed learning about these incredible behind-the-scenes moments from The Tonight Show, make sure you hit that like button and share this video with your friends. There are so many more untold stories from the golden age of television, and we'll keep bringing them to you if you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Johnny Carson may be gone, but his legacy of laughter, drama, and unforgettable television lives on forever. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.